Hey guys, this is Jana with Northwoods Animal Learning and Wellness Center, and I'm sitting down today with my mom and business partner, and we're going to try to get some videos up for you guys. Just really wanting to produce some content, give some people some information to be able to hopefully help them and their dogs, and also just kind of get a feel for us, what we do here, what I do with the dogs, some thoughts and beliefs that I have that I wanted to share with you guys. It's a pretty small operation. We literally have an old camcorder on a tripod right now on the deck. We have we're not technologically savvy, so we'll actually have to physically get up and turn off the power button. So just bear with us. But it's not editing, so we want it to be a very candid, casual dialogue, a conversation. We do have some notes and some, questions to kind of keep me on track, because if you've ever watched my videos, I like to ramble, and then I think information gets lost in that. So that's her job. She's usually pretty good at keeping me on point and wrapping it up. So
it's a big job.
It is a big job. That's for sure. That's don't envy anyone that job, but yeah.
Do you want to talk about the different kinds of videos that you're going to produce, discussion versus hands-on?
Yeah, so we want to do both discussion and hands-on. Discussion I think is really important, so you have an idea, maybe a little bit of an idea about what I'm doing before I do it. So conversation, and then we also want to do some hands-on videos. So working with my dogs, maybe her dogs, boarding dogs, whatever dogs we can find. There's not a shortage around here. But just giving some hands-on stuff so that you can take what we have in a conversation format and you can start applying that to your own dogs and hopefully helping you and your dogs at home.
And I do think the visual applications are really helpful for people. I know when I was working with horses years ago, I came across a book that I absolutely loved, and it really resonated with me. And then I was fortunate enough to actually become friends with the guy who wrote the book, and I realized how far off some of my interpretations of that book were when it came to actually working with and being with my horses. So I think that'll be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Am I supposed to say something else?
Yes.
About the videos?
How about introductions of ourselves?
Oh yeah, introduce ourselves. So I'm Jana. So I do the dog training here with Northwoods Animal Learning and Wellness Center. So I do private lessons, group classes, workshops, open training nights. We also offer free Saturday morning socialization sessions and pack walks to be able to help people. My husband Austin, he runs the boarding program here too. And then if you want to introduce yourself.
I'm just kind of a behind the scenes contributor. I do a lot of the book work, chores, stuff like that. Try to stay behind the scenes where I can be most useful. I would like to mention that a lot of the content that we hope to produce for videos, we will publish for free at no charge. Same as our socialization sessions and the pack walks. We believe strongly that there should be plenty of access out there for people who are looking for help for their dogs, to improve things. And so while we do have the intent of exploring the options of virtual paid learning content, a lot of it we would like to keep free so that there is enough information out there for anyone struggling to go through and hopefully get some help.
Yeah. We really want to help people and their dogs. That's our biggest goal and objective.
And I know Jana wanted me to talk a little bit about my background with my dogs. I've had dogs my whole life, and I know she hears that all the time. And I am a prime example of why that can really be irrelevant when it comes to different dogs and different personalities. My background was actually with horses, which taught me a lot. I was really lucky to have some really positive influences in my life. Jana grew up with me having our livelihood revolve around horses, and of course, we always had dogs and cats as well. More recently, now the 4 dogs I currently have probably presented the most challenges to me in terms of trying to understand dog behavior. Um, I have Australian Shepherd. I have a little Rottweiler cross, a cattle dog, and Coda, who I guess I would consider like a Plot Hound Pit Bull mix. He's the most recent addition to our family. Um, and these dogs have been a lot of work for me. There's a lot more work to do. They have really forced me to try to consider things from the dog's perspective, of which I've been very resistant because just like a lot of people, I just want my dogs to be there for me, and I want the time with my dogs to kind of be a release of any other responsibility. We have so many expectations and responsibilities in our lives right now that I think for me, the one area I hoped to escape from all of that was time with my dogs. I didn't really want to have to think a lot. I kind of just expected them, it to all be just rainbows and unicorns, just good times, and for them to be grateful for the home they have. So, very little issues, but instead, I have dogs that I feel that to this date I'm still managing a little bit too much because I haven't quite established a level of respect I would like. Um, I feel constantly on alert with them, that I'm watching what they're doing, their interactions with each other, with me, with other people. Um, and so this has been a pretty insightful journey, and I hope that I can keep learning to keep my dogs safe and everyone else safe. Something else that changed is we've moved to a different property, and on this property, there's a lot of different variables. We have a lot of wildlife, we have a lot of wooded areas, a lot of open fields, we have a creek, which we refer to as Wildlife Highway. So for me, being out there with my dogs and having them loose with me to hopefully allow them to be a dog, I feel like I have to be on pretty high on alert to keep them safe, me safe, and wildlife safe. And it's been pretty eye opening. It's been quite a challenge. We also used to take our dogs riding with us all the time. That was very much a regular part of the day. And while we still could do that with as many dogs as we now have around, Jana, I think, has 11. I have 4, one of which, Coda, I'm not to the point where I trust him quite off leash yet. I realized how much effort it really took to pay attention, to be devoted to my horse, the environment, and my dogs, and how all of that worked together. So I've backed up a little bit, went back to the basics, and working it with just the dogs and me, and seeing how that works. So other than that, I can say that obedience, I used to believe obedience was what it was all about, that if I could use terms, verbalize my wishes to the dogs, then it would be easy for them to understand, and an easy way for communication. But maybe a good analogy I can use there with the horse experience is when I'm riding my horses, I don't. I almost never verbalize things with them. Not that it can't be done, and I'm not saying there's not a use for that or that it isn't useful. But with the horses, it's mostly off of a feel. And if I'm doing something, if I'm actually doing a job with the horses, my mind is focused on the job. And when my mind is focused on the job, the horse kind of just comes along better with me, and I don't have the time to say, okay, turn left or turn right. Um, it all just kind of happens the same, and I've noticed that with my dogs. For example, if I need to stop and fix a fence, I don't want to have to tell all of them to stop, sit, lay down, wait. I just want them to wait. And I don't care how they do it, really where they do it, as long as they stay within a certain guide so that I can go and fix the fence. So in a way, it's actually simpler, but in another way, it's more challenging because that's asking your dog for things like that actually shows you more of those holes, shows you what you don't have when you're not using the obedience terms or common terms. But the one thing you might have noticed with things like sit down, etc., is that even when your dogs are executing them, their minds aren't necessarily there. So they're just chomping at the bit to get up and be released. And I find that when I work on getting it the other way without using as many words and but yet drawing expectations, they're much more relaxed about it. So I guess that's where I'll summarize. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about your dogs.
Well, just a note on that. When she's talking about obedience versus, just getting different behaviors, I mean, obedience is physically getting a dog into control. So you're not getting the mind, you're getting the physical part of it. So I think sometimes we create an illusion of control, so we feel really, really good about that, but we're not changing the state of mind in a lot of times. And I think that's an important thing to note there with your observations.
Yes, and I do use certain words for my dogs, which have come in very handy. Like get behind or front or different things. They've really been useful, so I don't discard them completely. But I think my priority has shifted to trying to do things from the perspective more of the state of mind and respect. And I find I'm talking a lot less to them and actually getting a little bit more, even though I'm far from where I need to be with the dogs that I have.
Yeah. So you want me to talk about my dogs?
Well, if you'd like to.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. So as she mentioned earlier, I have 11. Technically, only 10 of those are mine. One of them is a long-term foster for my in-laws, brother and sister-in-law. But the 10 that I have, it's been quite a journey with them. So far, I went from having 6 dogs to, in a very short period, having 10. So with my 6 dogs that I had, they are all different sizes, different breeds, so they've taught me a lot. They've been really challenging, and I always used to kind of have the excuse of, oh, well, I'm working other people's dogs, I don't really have time to be training my dogs. And then I just realized that a big missing part of that is just how you live with your dogs. It doesn't matter about taking time out to train, even though that's very beneficial, very helpful, absolutely. How you live with them, I think, means more. So they've taught me a lot about that. And then last year, I ended up getting a dog from a client who we knew with this dog, he would not be able to be rehomed. And I was kind of attached to him, so I took him on. And he has taught me a lot. That's Coda. He's a German Shepherd Lab mix, and he's a pretty intense dog. He had some pretty nasty separation anxiety and some areas like that, and I feel like people have really let him down. So he's a new addition. And then I ended up getting 2 huskies that I got, and they've kind of got like a litter mate syndrome thing going on, and they didn't have a whole lot of human interaction before I got them, so that was very interesting. They were outdoor dogs, bringing them into the house. And then I got another puppy who came from a family who she had some little dog issues, but other than that, she's been great. But yeah, I feel like between those 4 dogs and then the 6 dogs I had before that, they teach me a lot about living in a home with multiple dogs, all sorts of different personalities, different sizes. I've got a 5-pound Chihuahua, and I've got a Staghound, I've got a German Shepherd, I've got Huskies, Australian Shepherds, so different breeds, different categories. I'm rambling now, but I guess those are my dogs, and sometimes it's a struggle, honestly, having all of them and wanting to make sure that I'm fulfilling their needs and that they're getting what they what they need to be happy and healthy, and they've all kind of come with their issues that we're working on, and it's a lifestyle. When you have that many different dogs, it's a lifestyle that I'm very grateful for. I think that they teach me a lot.
And I think on that too, on the lifestyle thing, it's a good place to talk about the pets and people that you encounter that seek you out for the services. Um, there are so, it's such a traditional mindset in society now that obedience is the end all. Obedience solves everything. Um, or the lack of maybe awareness of what dogs really are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, everyone knows of dogs that are just highly tolerant and adaptable and seem to get along in every situation and take a seemingly incredibly small amount of work. They just are. They mesh into society very well. And something we've talked a lot about are, of course, the dogs that don't, which are the dogs you are exposed to a lot because people are seeking out your help because they're encountering some challenges. And so we've had a lot of discussion about roles of dogs in society, how that's changed, and people's perceptions of dogs. We've kind of become a fur
First of all,
baby.
can I cut you off right
Yes.
there? Before you move on to that point, I'd like to point out like what she talked about with people coming in for behavior consultations and always being able to, having the dogs that adapt well and do well, and now they're struggling with their dogs, and that's something that for me I get a lot of people that come in and they're like, I've had dogs for 40 years and I've always treated my dogs this way and I've always done this with my dogs, and it's never been a problem. And then you get that dog where it is a problem. They don't adapt like that. They're dogs. And it's interesting when I have conversations with those people in the behavior consultation. I get people, so they'll talk about their problems, whether it's anxiety or aggression or manners or whatever their concerns are for coming to see me. And I say, okay, so one thing that I ask them is, well, what is your goal with your dog? What do you want to see? What do you want to achieve with your dog? And almost always the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, well, they need to learn obedience. They need to learn how to sit and down and stay and all of those things. And it's interesting because they're not going out and using that obedience in a show world or anything else where they wouldn't need it, but they're thinking that applying obedience to their lives is what's going to fix their problems, when really I think that that's not necessary. So
But you can understand their perspective because
Absolutely.
as a society, that's kind of where the dog training industry has been funneled into is obedience. We've kind of neglected the state of mind to a degree and went more on the obedience aspect. So
and our relationship has changed with our dogs too,
And the
which is where you were going.
relationship has changed considerably even since I was a kid. And for one, I can honestly understand people's perspectives. So I think we should make it clear that there is no judgment of that. I would love to have dogs that I can just have sit on my lap and love and cuddle and almost draw no boundaries, but then have no consequences for that. I want to be lazy. I mean, that's the truth. That's what I want. And I guess maybe thankfully or not so thankfully, that's not the dogs I find myself sharing a house with right now. So it's kind of forced me into something. But the people that seek you out, first of all, kudos to them for trying to find help. And
Instead
I know
of just disposing of their dog.
Yes, and you tend to meet a lot of resistance when you try to shift the conversation away from obedience into more of behavior. And I think that's understandable because in some ways it seems like it's more work. It requires more maybe on the human because something like
the human has to
can
change.
Can be a little bit more simple. You just go out and do repetitions, whatever your approach. might be, whether it's marker training or whatever, and you
Yeah.
get an end result. Where with the behavior stuff, those you probably will no longer even need the sit or down, but now it requires you to be a little bit more tuned in to the dogs, who are much more keen observers than we are.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a big part of it is, if you come in for where I meet the resistance, like she said, is if you come in for a behavior consultation, another thing is you want to be like, well, this dog is broken. He's not behaving, he's not doing what he's supposed to do. He's doing this, he's doing that, he's doing this other thing, and I want him to stop doing that. Well, unfortunately, in order to get the dog to change, you're not going to be able to change your dog's behavior if you don't change your behavior. So then that makes you have to take a look in the mirror and how are you looking at your dog, how are you treating your dog, and ultimately how are you living with your dog. So, and sometimes when people hear that we talk about, how we live with our dogs, their first fear is, oh my gosh, you mean he can't sleep with me and he can't be put in these sweaters and he can't be my fur baby and I can't love him and shower him with affection. And I don't want to take away your relationship that you have with your dog, but I do want it to be beneficial for not only you and your emotional needs and how cute they are and you just want to love them and cuddle them and spoil them, but I also want it to be beneficial for the dog. So the dog is being respected for who he is and what he is capable of doing, and so that you guys can both, have a mutually beneficial relationship so both parties are happy.
It's funny when you think of the phrase, a dog is a dog. And for some people, that might actually stir about like some uneasy feelings, like, oh no, my dog is not just a dog, but he is a dog. And I think my hope is to respect my dog or my horse. A horse is a horse. I don't want them to be human. The reason I have them is because I appreciate and respect them for what they are, intelligent, emotional beings. And with that said, I don't need to make them into another human. I can go out and find more human friends for that. But
Yeah, I get a lot of people who go, I like dogs more than people, and then they turn around and try to make their dog a people, and then don't understand why it doesn't work for them.
yeah,
So,
and that's hard. It's
yeah,
hard
it
because
is
that
hard.
is what we want to do for various reasons. We work hard these days. Lives are very busy, stressful. There's a lot of pressure. So when you come home, you want to be able to just do nothing.
Have a good cuddle with your dog on the couch.
Netflix and dogs on your lap and loving them up. Um,
Netflix and cuddle your dog.
what, so in talking about behavior consultations, what are some of the most common reasons that people actually contact you, that they seek out your help?
Yeah. So a lot of different reasons. I mean, it can be everything from just manners. Their dog is jumping up on company, maybe is obnoxious when people come over, maybe obnoxious with the owners when they're coming home from work, or trying to get the dog to do something. Maybe they have a hard time walking their dog. Reactivity, I feel, is becoming more and more a problem. So reactivity meaning, they're walking their dog, they can't control their dog on leash, and then another person or dog comes by and that dog has maybe a negative reaction according to the person. So that can be an issue. People having dogs that they don't come when called, that's a big one. They want to be able to have their dog off leash and then be able to call their dog back to them for safety or other purposes. And then other just behaviors that the owners are struggling with and the dogs are struggling with, whether that's anxiety or aggression, anything like that. So yeah, those tend to be, the main issues that people come to me for, but all sorts of issues, yeah.
And today there's a lot, seems like there's a lot more multiple dog households.
Yeah.
And so the dynamics really change when you start adding dogs. And I know there's been a lot of people who have multiple dogs and they fight, or there's
Or you have
food
multiple dogs
aggression.
and the owners are no longer relevant. because now the dogs have, so if you have problems with your dog when company comes over and you have one dog jumping up on your company, now instead of one dog jumping up on company, you have two dogs jumping up on company, or, well, one dog's jumping, the other one's barking and growling, so they feed off of each other too.
And maybe we could use that example to give people a visual idea of the difference between behavior and obedience.
Yeah.
So would it be fair, let's use company arriving for the example.
That's a good one.
So in obedience, if you're in an obedient state of mind, you might put your dogs on a place bed
Or
sit or down and expect them to wait until they're released. And again, if that's working for people, that's, great. But what would that look like if you're trying to work from a behavior, from the state of mind?
Yeah.
So someone knocks on the door.
So if someone knocks on, so for example, in my house, because like we mentioned, I have 11 dogs in my house. If company knocks on the door, I don't want to have to put 11 dogs in a sit or a place fed and make sure that they're all maintaining their positions while I open the door, get my company in, and then if one dog gets up, having to manage that. Instead, I want to be able to just get up to the door or stand up and tell my dogs to back off. That is one verbal command that I have, and back off means just whatever you're engaging with, leave it. So I want them to be able to back off, so I should be able to answer the door and have a space bubble where there are no dogs because I just claimed that space. I told my dogs, I want you out of this space.
Now that sounds, of course, great to most of us. We would love to have the ability to do that. Is there a way for you to just briefly say, how does one get that? How does one start to do that?
Yeah. So, and the first thing you have to have with your dog is relevance. Your dog has to kind of respect that if you ask them to move out of a space, that they will do that. So
maybe you should back up there. Maybe that's really where I should have asked the question. How do you know if you're relevant to your dog?
Well, one thing you can do, like I'll have clients do it, like in one of my first classes, is we'll have the dog standing there and see what happens when you walk into your dog. What do they do? But walk into your dog with intention, like, hey, I'm looking at you, I'm paying attention, I want you to engage, but I'm walking into you, I want you to move out of this space right here. And there's a lot of dogs that they don't move for their owners, so then their owner's walking into them and the dog's just stop, they're just nope, I'm not moving out of your space. Other dogs jump up on their owners and get excited and start mouthing the arms. Other dogs, the owners start walking into them kind of with a, hey, pay attention to me, and the dog goes and turns and walks away fine, I'll go somewhere else, I don't really care about you.
And I think this might be a good place to kind of insert a little disclaimer, is that sometimes, to people's complete shock, when they start drawing boundaries or maybe changing things, the dogs can be very resistant, and they could even snap or growl. So I think maybe it's worth discussing that, because a lot of people seem to be really surprised that when they go to do something that maybe should be so simple, like move a dog out of their space or take something from a dog or maybe trim their nails, that all of a sudden it's a different dog. So maybe
their sweet little cuddle buddy all of a sudden will tell them no and start correcting them, and in a way, it's hard for people to see, essentially your best friend and your family member acting that way to you, but at the same time, it makes sense, because if you have, we always kind of joke, it's like a roommate relationship with your dog. So if you guys are roommates and you're best friends, but your dog can go where they want, when they want, and your dog is making a lot of choices, and pretty much you're two entities sharing the same house. I'll get clients who go, oh yeah, my dog thinks it's their house, and they're so spoiled. You're roommates. And I think about me personally, or other people I know, that if you're living with your roommate and your roommate starts telling you what to do, or drawing lines, or asking you to change your life choices, what are you going to tell your roommate? You're not the boss of me. I don't have to listen to that. And so we have to be relevant to our dogs in an advocate. We have to be an advocate for our dogs and have them, respect us and find us relevant, so that when we do ask them to go do something, they're not like, screw you, I don't have to listen. They actually, they want to. They understand they're part of a team. They're part of a partnership.
They're part of a family
Yeah,
unit.
a family unit. And so that's something, when we talk about getting relevance from our dogs, and the dogs meeting that with resistance, I mean, the analogy that I use was, if you've had that relationship with them probably since you got them, since they were puppies, and now you're trying to change that relationship, and that can be hard. I mean, anyone who has had to work on a problematic relationship or work through some different struggles, I mean, it's hard enough when we're both humans, that can communicate to each other, but now we're living with a completely different species. So,
And
yeah.
I think it's maybe worth adding to there how deeply personal we tend to take it as humans if something does go wrong. Our emotions seem to go in full drive. If my dog were, to growl at me or something, it's like, it might anger us or like hurt our feelings. Like, why would they do that to us?
Yeah.
I've done all of this to them. Or maybe it's the other extreme and we just back away and say, oh, he doesn't want to do that right now, so I'm not going to make him. So there's all those different degrees that I think are worthy of mentioning. But it's a lot harder to try to understand the dog being a dog. But anyways, I don't want to get off topic. I just thought it was worthy of having a disclaimer that dogs, if you start trying some things with your dogs, you might be surprised to realize that they're a little bit resistant to it and vocal about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so kind of going back to that doorway analogy, how to get your dog, if I walk into my dogs, if I walk into them with intention, like, hey, get out of this space, and then I go, let's say I'm going to the door and they're crowding, I should be able to walk into them, almost like you're shooing them, claiming that space, pushing them back, and then I should be able to go back towards the door, and if they move forward, I'm going to turn around, and if I have to, I mean, ideally I just have to turn around if they break, but if I have to, I'll push them back again, and I'm letting them know, I don't want you in this bubble. I don't want you in this bubble right now. I'm going to have company in this bubble. But it's important to realize too that if they're in an excited state of mind, I might push them back further, and I don't care what they do. They can sit or down right there. They can say, well, this company's not here for me, and go lay on a bed or whatever, but I'm essentially just saying, I don't want you here right now.
And that actually kind of leads into another topic of clarity, because I, for one, have fallen victim to that, where you get in these habits. Someone knocks on the door, dogs bark, you tell them to be quiet, you tell them to be quiet again, you tell them to be quiet. Well, eventually they quiet down, but they don't do it because of you. They do it in spite of you because they do it on their own. And sometimes for me too, it's hard to find that line of clarity, where really what's easier on the dog. For me, for 15 years of their lives, to tell them be quiet 8 different times every single time someone comes to the door, or is it to do what it is necessary for them to learn that that's not their job, that's not an expectation I have of them to bark at company, so that it might be uncomfortable and awkward to find that balance where I can have them be quiet. But let's say, for example, that takes a month to do, or 10 different times if people come into the door. I then get X amount of years of shared life with them where that isn't an issue. But we tend to repeat things. We tend to do things over and over. Be quiet, or come here, or go lay down, lay down, lay down. And we repeat ourselves until we are meaningless to them. Our words no longer have any meaning because there's never any follow through, there's never any clarity. So we might as well be speaking a different language, which is what we are doing.
Yeah. And the other thing on that note is, if we are struggling with, a lot of times people will come to me and they'll say, I've got all these issues, or my dog does this, and that, and the other thing, but I don't really, I'm not really worried about those. If we could just fix this issue, I would be happy. And unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. If we have one issue, usually we see other areas in life where those issues present themselves because they're all connected. So it's like if I were to go to a personal trainer and say, yeah, I don't care about my arms or my stomach rolls or my thick calves, just fix these thighs. The personal trainer isn't just going to look at my thighs and give me thigh toning exercises. While that might be a component of it, the personal trainer is going to want to know what I eat, what exercise am I doing, how am I sleeping, what is my mental state, because it's all connected in the bigger picture. And so if I just do my thigh toning exercises and don't change anything else, I might not see results. And that's the same thing with the dog. So if you come to me and say, I only want, work with the dog coming, charging company and jumping up on them, well, yeah, we're going to address that, but we also need to address, how you're living with your dog. It's all connected.
And in that sense, too, wouldn't it be fair to say then, let's say if you look at someone and their dog walks good on a loose leash and isn't reacting to people walking by, isn't that almost then a reflection of that relationship?
Yeah.
That because when those things start to fall in place, is it fair to say then, generally speaking, there's a lot of other things that are working good with the relationship? Or vice versa, if your dog is pulling and reactive on a leash and barking at people, that if you take care of that as a foundation, or I don't know what the right word is, that those things might actually just start to fade off themselves because the dogs don't feel a need to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a lot of that. It's all connected, and I saw something on Facebook the other day where it's kind of like a comic strip, and there was two women talking, and one woman has a really well-behaved dog, and the dog's just standing there hanging out, and the other woman's got this dog that's like pulling on the leash, barking at like another passerby or something, and the woman with the naughty dog is like, how did you get that dog? What kind of dog is that? Who's your breeder? And the lady with the well-behaved dog is just saying, this is how I live with my dog, this is what I expect from my dog, this is my relationship with my dog, all of those things. And the lady with the naughty dog, she just can't accept those answers. She's thinking about it as something else. It's a little bit off topic.
Not really. I think it all goes to the same thing, that it's very hard for us because, and I think when people come to you too, they want to pay you to fix the problem and then have it transfer over into their relationship.
And what they're thinking the problem is
the dog.
They're thinking the problem is the dog, and they need to understand that the problem is how they're living with the dog. In a lot of situations. I mean, there are other factors. I mean, genetics do play a role, breed plays a role, but how we, and that should, I would like to think, I think sometimes when people first hear that or kind of start to understand that they're the problem, sometimes that's such a negative thing, that they get really upset by that. And I there's so many different components, whether it's they're upset because now we're shattering the illusion, or like the dream you had with your dog. But I'd almost like to think, what I try to tell people is that's a good thing. That's hopeful, because that means that there's hope for change, because if you change your behaviors, your dog can change. Versus if I looked at that dog and was like, oh yeah, this is genetics, your dog is the problem, you're never gonna, fix that. I mean, to me, that's less hopeful than saying, oh yeah, if you change this and do this, it works. So.
And I think too, along with that, is I know for me, some of the struggles I have, which maybe other people can relate to. I get almost tired just thinking about it, but when you start realizing these different things, these different avenues to explore with your dogs, I lost my train of thought. Sometimes there's guilt and frustration and anger and resistance, like I feel guilty that I allowed certain things with the dog, or how did I not see that, or how, that should have been so simple. And I think, thankfully, with my background with horses, is don't try to deny any of those feelings that you have, but acknowledge them, but then move on.
Yeah.
There is really no room for our emotions, or in essence our ego, when we're working with them. We shouldn't take things personally. We need to let go of guilt, frustration, impatience, um, because I think if we hang on to that stuff, it just perpetuates more negative choices that we might make in regards to our dogs. But I know that's a common thing where people feel so bad for their dogs, even in the sense they might feel bad drawing boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
They feel bad because they're gone a lot, and so
And
they
that,
want to buy a lot of toys to try
yeah,
to
almost buy
ease.
their dog's affection.
Yes.
Or I'll get clients who, they really want to set rules and boundaries with their dogs, but then they'll like, I have I know someone who's a dog trainer, and she was talking about with her clients, she was trying to get them to set rules and boundaries with the dog, and the client sent her a picture of the dog snuggling on the couch with her. And I get this all the time. Or people will Facebook friend me and then post a picture of them like cuddling in bed and, snuggling with their dog, which I'm not totally against. I don't, I want to make that clear. But if their dog can't handle it, or maybe that's not part of their homework, and they'll say, well, I felt bad because they were looking at me so sad. And it's almost like we feel bad having our dogs lay on a floor or lay on a dog bed or lay on the ground, where I don't know if, I don't know if the camera probably can't see, but we've got one dog laying on the deck, one dog laying out in the grass over there, and yeah, they're all laying out in the grass. And I don't look at those dogs and go, oh, poor babies, look at them laying on the grass like animals. I go, they're dogs. They're happy out there. They're in nature.
And that
yeah.
was one of the things that it took me kind of a long time to get to, because I always had these ideas of what happiness meant to my dog, and it involved lots of exercise and this and that. But now it's gotten to a point where I think my dogs are just happy hanging out with me.
Yeah.
Whether they're sitting and looking around, or laying in the house, or we are out in the woods, walking or something like that. But it's like what my perception of what made them happy is starting to change a little bit. And 5 years from now, that might change yet again, but that's kind of where I'm at right now, is understanding and appreciating that they seem to just like hanging out.
Yeah.
I don't need to be doing something to try to make their life any better, other than understanding their needs.
There's a lot of things, going, there's a thing being shared around Facebook right now where you see all these different ways to feed your dogs, like snuffle mats and interactive toys and all of these. And I feel like, buy this toy and play with this. And we're constantly trying to keep our dogs entertained. And, we'll get into this in another video, but so having 11 dogs up at my house, I'll often ask people, I'm like, can you imagine how many dog toys I have in my house? And they'll be like, oh my gosh, I can't, because for their one dog, there's 20 to 100 toys, and they're just like blown away. And I go, zero, none. My dogs don't need toys. They don't need to be constantly doing something, because I feel like that kind of falls into, the people that you meet. And I know I've fallen into this trap before, so no comment on your end. But the people who always have to have their phone out in front of them because they can't just look at the look on your face. I can just tell, but the people who, they always have to be doing something. They always have to be entertained. They always have to be busy. And I don't think that's a healthy state. I mean, I think like looking around at these dogs, and they're just like laying here, they're just like hanging out, I think they're happy. Now granted, I mean, they might not be happy if all they do is lay around 24/7, 365 days a year, that kind of a thing. So there's, needs to fulfill, but I think sometimes we take exercise too far, or mental stimulation too far, and we do it because we want to feel good about ourselves. And part of that is we want our dogs to feel good. So it comes from good intentions, and that's why we can't judge people that come in for training, but we want them to be like, all right, let's take a step back and really evaluate what our dogs need.
Okay, well, I think that would be a good place to pause this for now. I can't remember if you mentioned earlier that we're going to try to do several different segments,
Yeah.
with the goal of them being shorter, so that people can just kind of pick and choose what they want,
Yeah.
instead of taking a real long time. So
And this was just a like kind of an about us.
yes,
Yeah,
just
get
a
to know
brief
us.
intro.
Yeah. Turned out a little less brief. But see, she's got to get up to turn off the camera. Thanks, guys.